What does it mean to lead an intellectual life? Now, of course, I have books behind me, so presumably that's what that means. An intellectual is someone who reads books, or at least is good enough to, good enough at pretending to have read enough books and can pull out all sorts of quotes from any sort of book that is part of the canon, and hence we understand perhaps an intellectual, someone who has read a lot. So someone who has, in this sense, put in the work of intelligence, the work of reading, the work of memorizing for the sake of memorizing, etc. Now, there could be perhaps even a sort of a more profound understanding of the intellectual as someone who is capable of not just using certain quotes from certain authors as ornaments, but as someone who is capable of still moving within this beautiful, long, and terrifying Sinnzusammenhang, this web or context of meaning that we refer to as the Occident. That, of course, would be the profounder iteration, if you like, of an intellectual. But if we take the meaning of the word intellectus more seriously, we shouldn't perhaps think of it in any way, the way it just described. Intellectus, for Aquinas, for example, is related in some sense to ratio, but is also specifically superhuman, übermenschlich, superhumanum. It is not a feature, if you like, or a quality of man, but it is part of the angelic intellectus. And the human being, in some way, participates in the intellect, which is the Roman or Latin translation of nous, of the Aristotelian nous, of the divine nous. So intellectus is divine. And it is this capacity of seeing. And so it's not active, it's not an activity, it's not work, definitely not anything to do with intellectual labor or intellectual work, etc., how we might think of it in the usual sense. But it's not purely passive either. It's the capacity to, or simply to perceive, to take in, vernehmen would be the German word perhaps. So the intellectus is not discursive reasoning. The intellectus is not the capacity of ratio, it's got nothing to do with it. And it doesn't have to do very much with what we might usually associate with the term the intellectual life. It's not to do with how much one has read or how much one knows, but instead has to do very much with the openness to receive from the divine messages, as strange as this sounds, and to take in the world as it presents itself, without categories and without perhaps any sort of discursive reasoning, etc., that also might come in. It is essentially superhuman. It goes beyond the human being. It is not, so in that sense, it would actually be wrong to speak of it as a capacity. It's much more a mode of being. It's much more a way of seeing, a way of being open to take in the world. In this sense, it's deeply related to leisure. And again, in this way, to the European spirit, to the European way of being able to, or basing our entire being on leisure, on scolaire, on this moment of an initial seeing that lets the phenomena be, if you like. So it is a path of knowing is intellectus that, of course, does also not require ratio, but if we want to have all-encompassing knowing, we also need ratio. But the vision, the way of seeing of intellectus, the Greek word might also be theoria. It is in theoria, so it's in high theory. which doesn't require any labor, but it requires only to be able to see that which opens itself up to us. It's a simple looking at, a simple looking, disinterested, if you like. And this seeing is the intellectual, seeing that the intellectual life is hence not what we might usually associate with it. It's not the one who's got books behind him as I do, books you read or don't read or can pull quotes out of, etc. But is he or she who has this initial openness to that which is superhumanum, übermenschlich, superhuman, which is not to say human in overdrive mode, and is not to say superhuman as incredibly capacitated or powerful, but exceeds the human being. That's to say, is not available to human control. That is the point, perhaps most importantly. It's not within our control whether we are, quote unquote, truly intellectual or not. So perhaps think about it in the future, what we mean, if we mean anything by the word intellectual, and of course how it's taken on a completely different meaning from its original sense, but how we could perhaps also retake this meaning, this to be again in a more of a receivership rather than someone who's always looking for an answer or a quick definition, etc. Especially in a day and age of where AI is just the tip of the spear of a much longer process, where we look up definitions of concepts and in this ghost-like manner try to take them at face value and then operate with them. These operative concepts that we have everywhere, be they philosophical or even just corporate concepts. And rather, to be intellectual means to be open again to this initial seeing, again, this initial taking in, and to be receptive to the world as it shows itself by itself. And of course, the question is whether that is in some sense still possible without already attacking it or trying to look for a quick answer or definition of what might show itself. That is the initial thamatzein, the initial wonder and amazement at the fact, the sheer that of existence, the sheer that of being, that something is at all. Thank you.